Well, to help us understand the security lapses at the event yesterday and how President Trump will be protected going forward, we are joined by Jeff Hawn, a military expert at the London School of Economics. Welcome, Mr. Hawn. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so how did this happen? I mean, you know, here is a former president being shot at by a 20-year-old from a rooftop, I assume, a few hundred meters away. How was that happen? I mean, how was that possible?
Well, so just a minor adjustment to your earlier statement. This is not the first time this has happened in U.S. history. Obviously, former President Theodore Roosevelt an attempt was made on his life during his re-election campaign while he was a presidential candidate. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, there's an attempt on his life. And of course, Robert Kennedy famously was killed during the presidential primaries during his attempt to attain the presidency. Presidential candidates are major targets because they're major focal points for people's delusions and anger. In this particular case, it seems that a lone gunman who there was no warning, he hadn't sent in any threats or anything that we have seen, was able to get within a very close distance of former President Trump with a weapon that he had legally purchased and opened fire. Now, how exactly the logistics of that broke down, there's a couple of factors at play here. One is that while the U.S. Secret Service is responsible for the protection of presidential candidates, former presidents, and sitting presidents, they rely a lot from local law enforcement, and sometimes communications between those two elements break down. The U.S. Secret Service is very limited on manpower. Local law enforcement sometimes lacks experience and expertise in close-in protection, and in this particular case, it appears that a potential vantage point was not sufficiently guarded or was missed. It's worth noting that the Secret Service was able to get former President Trump to safety very rapidly and to neutralize the shooter within minutes of the weapon being fired. Considering it's a semi-automatic weapon, it could have potentially been a much worse situation. Well, but one other thing to note, though, also, it's clear the person didn't have any expertise based on how he fired the shot, and that it's likely the reason why he was able to get so close is that, unfortunately, the Trump campaign, due to financial decisions, has been unable or unwilling to book more secure venues. So in this particular case, they were in a very open, very unsecure location, and that might have made it more difficult for Secret Service to effectively seal off the environment.
Yes, but it's not unusual, is it, for rallies to be held in the open air? And one would have thought that Secret Service would have had enough experience of that by now to do it a bit more effectively. There were some security commentators who said, well, you know, rooftops are an obvious place to watch. And this was one of them, and it wasn't watched. You say that it might have been because of lack of funding, but also, I mean, even for the local police forces, this would have been a fairly obvious thing to do, wouldn't it?
Yes, but again, I'm not familiar with the particular location or how long they had to prepare the security for the rally. There's a lot of factors we still don't know about. There, a couple of these things I laid out are plausible explanations how this was missed, but really it seems to just come down to a breakdown in logistics, communications, and it created a gap in security that the gunman exploited. It's the old adage that when protecting someone, you need to get lucky every single time. The bad guy just needs to get lucky once.
Right. Okay. Now talking about breakdowns in communication, the BBC conducted an interview with a rallygoer who said that basically they'd seen the gunman on the rooftop and they were waving at Secret Service and police policemen and women and telling them that this gunman was there, and yet they said no one did anything about it. Does that surprise you?
Yes and no. It's surprising that it was not acted on more quickly. It's not surprising, though, that there might have been a freeze-up or there might have been a miscommunications between it's unclear who he informed. Did he inform Secret Service directly? Did he inform local police? Either way, it looks like he did it just a few minutes before the gunman opened fire. And in that window of opportunity, it's very likely that there was a communications breakdown, and decisive action was not taken. And we've seen issues like this in the past with other law enforcement incidents where there's a lack of effective leadership, there's a lack of effective response. And then these communications breakdowns will happen. I certainly think that everyone involved in the security detail, local law enforcement, and the Secret Service absolutely operated with the best intentions and in the best capacity of their training. But these mistakes will happen. And unfortunately, former President Trump is a major potential target for a wide variety of people who have bizarre or extreme outlooks.
Right. OK. Well, moving forward now, I suppose, I mean, there are lessons then to be learned from what happened yesterday evening. And I hope they are absorbed sooner rather than later, because, of course, the Republican National Convention starts tomorrow. And clearly there's, concern about the safety not only of former President Trump, but of other members of the convention. What do you think the Secret Service is going to do to tighten up security for that?
Well, I think that they'll definitely coordinate more closely with the FBI to identify potential threats. I think that they'll certainly ask for an expansion of resources from local law enforcement. They'll probably also increase their presence available at the convention. And you'll definitely see an uptick in overall security. At this point, I'm not aware if the National Guard's being brought in to provide additional resources. But considering the heightened political tension, there's no doubt that there will be a major increase of security at the Republican convention.
Right. Okay. So again, one hopes that does work more in a more integrated way to avoid communication lapses. Now, the other thing is that a bomb was found in the car of the shooter. Another surprising fact, isn't it? I mean, how is a car with a bomb allowed to get so close to someone like former President Trump?
Well, I'm unaware of what the exact makeup of the explosive device was. That can range from anything as small as a pipe bomb, which is essentially fireworks packed into a PCP pipe, or something as large as a TATP improvised explosive. But unfortunately, often the first warning sign you'll get of an explosive device in a vehicle is after it detonates. So you need to have a bomb-sniffing dog to be able to go up to the right car. And obviously those dogs are a very precious resource that has to be husbanded. They'll probably have them deployed around the crowd to make sure no one brought an explosive device into the crowd, but didn't deploy them to check vehicles until after the shooting when they were doing their search. But vehicle explosive devices, always a big point of concern with these kind of individual lone wolf attacks. There's no evidence at this time the shooter was part of any kind of broader organization or conspiracy. But we do see individuals like this acting often. They lack the skill set or the expertise to carry out very effective attacks. However, unfortunately, sometimes they do have that skill set. Sometimes they get lucky. The worst terrorist attack in American soil, other than 9/11, the Oklahoma City bombing, was carried out by a single perpetrator with one accomplice and explosives placed into a vehicle. And obviously, that's the kind of security nightmare that they're worried about in the Republican National Convention, or something just as sudden as someone walking into an event with a gun. Again, American gun control laws make it very, very difficult to keep guns out of public spaces, especially in states with open carry laws or lax buying policies.
Yes, although some would argue that, the bad guys will always find a way to get a gun if they should wish to. Now, what else do we know about the shooter, Jeff? I mean, we know he was young. He was 20 years old. We know that he was a registered Republican. Do we know anything about his mental condition or his background, or what changed him, to become this violent?
I've not seen anything concrete released through the U.S. media through U.S. Law enforcement, so I wouldn't feel comfortable speculating. We do know, however, that unfortunately in the current political environment, it's possible for people to become radicalized very rapidly. We've seen past instances where people of various political beliefs have taken upon themselves to enact some sort of vigilante justice based on internet conspiracy theory. There was a shooting at the congressional baseball practice a couple of years ago that was carried out by someone who was very against their political beliefs. And then there, of course, was the Comet Ping Pong incident shortly before the 2016 election, which again was motivated by a rapid radicalization off the internet. There's been nothing released particularly that's alarming on the shooter's background or orientations or beliefs, but at this time there's just a complete vacuum of information. It is, however, alarming how rapidly people can fall into very extreme thinking in this day and age of social media and internet radicalism.
Indeed, and we hope that somehow we can damp down the temperature of the political rhetoric to avoid events, or certainly reduce the likelihood of events like this going forward. Now, he had an AR-15, I believe it is, a semi-automatic rifle. And he seems to have sprayed the crowd. Some estimates say eight rounds were fired, killing one person and injuring at least 3 people, including Trump. So the fact that he actually missed Trump, was that simply lucky? I mean, was he aiming for Trump and then managed to kill, some other guy? What happened?
Well, based on analysis of the video evidence of the event, it appears that the shooter lacked the sufficient tradecraft to carry out this kind of killing. In the first place, he brought the wrong kind of rifle for this kind of assassination, in that it was a semi-automatic rifle that's made for medium range. He was firing from 400 yards. If he'd been equipped with something with a scope, with a better range and more accuracy, it's more likely would have struck the target. Secondly, it looks like he was aiming at Trump, because the first round seemed to pass directly behind former President Trump's head. But at the angle of the shot is very telling, in that it appears he was aiming for the head, which any professional marksman would tell you you don't do in a shot like that. You try to aim for center of mass to maximize the likelihood of target. It's likely that he was aiming specifically for Trump because he fired the weapon on semi-automatic, and it appears the people who were unfortunately struck and killed were either behind or in front of the former president. And it is to the credit of the Secret Service that the counter sniper was able to rapidly identify him and neutralize him. But it does not appear that this was planned to be a mass casualty attack. The bomb in the vehicle might have been a plan for a suicide or for an effort to take out law enforcement in the event that he was being cornered. At this point, we do not know. If he had again, it depends on the size of the bomb in the vehicle, but if his plan had just been to attack the crowd, it's likely he might have tried to use that against the crowd, or simply fired at closer, more likely targets at a higher rate of fire. AR-15s are very easy to convert to fully automatic.
Right.
That, of course, is what the Las Vegas shooter did, and he inflicted horrific casualties before he was neutralized.
Right. Well, fortunately, yes. Fortunately, it wasn't. There weren't too many deaths. Sad though even one is, tragic though it is. Jeff Hawn, thank you very much indeed, and we'll be sure to invite you back as we get more details on the event.
Have a good evening.
You too. Thank you.